Oh, it's recording now.
Okay, I'm going to put it on the cloud server. I don't know what that means, but maybe I can find it later.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take attendance. We've got George and Logan and Brandon and Steve Green. Steve is on our faculty.
Hey, what's going on, Steve?
Hey. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know why my image is not, but that's okay.
You have to go, there's the 3 dots, and you have to just say join with video.
Oh, yes. All right.
Zoanne. All right. Look at all these wonderful people. Reed is here. That's great. Dominic. Okay. Wow, we got, if I put it in gallery view, I can see everybody. Look at that. Jacob and Lauren Fairchild. Wow, it's so nice to see everybody. I tell you, Anthony, you have brought us all together in a way that we have not been together all semester.
Well, that's what we do.
That's good.
It's really good because we're all doing our own things. You know, I do advising, we write emails, but, you know, we really haven't had ways to connect as a large group. So this is great. So everybody, I have not met Anthony in person yet, but he was nice enough to reach out to me at least 2 months ago and tell me a little bit about himself and about his book. And so I thought, what a great opportunity for us to meet. So I think he has some great things to offer, and I definitely want this to be interactive. So if you think of questions, you know, that come up, you know, please just jot something down or keep them in your mind. And I know some of you are going to be relating this material to your MUB 101 class with Mr. Drago. So, you know, try to think of some relevant things to the class as well. Right, I'm still, Mark Gabriel's here. Okay. Donald Conan. Connor McCausland. And I get to see everybody without their masks, almost everybody.
Beautiful.
That doesn't, you know, I miss seeing people smile, I'll tell you that. I mean, I see it, right? Isn't it? I see it in your eyes, but I don't always see everything.
Very, very true.
Veneziale. Hi, Rita Veneziale. I don't know you. Nick Lenhard. Wow, great turnout, everybody. Okay, why don't we start? So Anthony, what I'm going to do, let's see, is if I go to share screen, I'm going to say multiple participants can share. So if you want to try to, if there's anything you want to share, you know, any documents or anything like that.
Perfect. I'm here. I'm sharing it now. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Like I said, my name is Anthony Obas. I don't do a lot of the talking introduction, but we're going to get into the slides. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be interactive, and I think we're going to have a great time. So I always start presentations with a video because I think it captures the moment in a very great way for me. So I'm going to, can everybody see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Awesome. Awesome. Bear with me if there's tend to be technical difficulties. It's not the best way to do it, but I like this. We got to do what we got to do here. So let me know if you see it. Let me make this a little louder for everybody. Can everybody hear it?
Okay, right here with me. Well, we're on the way to Boston now. We just did New York City on Saturday. It was probably the best show I think I've ever done, man. It was great. It was crazy. Sold out the merch almost. My sister told me that she sold a sticker for $5. But that was the hustle. But tonight, I mean, Boston's going to be a different element. We got a different kind of lineup. I know my man Anthony Obas set the show up, running the show this time. Shout out to him. But it's been an interesting tour, to say the least. Some shows better than others, obviously. Like Saturday night was packed. The night before weren't not so packed. I'm not so sure about that bar in Washington D.C. The sound was so bad that I told the drummer behind me, I was like, just play over when I'm playing. He's like, you sure? I was like, yeah, it's gonna sound better than what is going on right now. The sound was just like so blown out, they couldn't even hear me.
What did it mean to have such a great turnout for the hometown New York City show?
I mean, the best part about it was that everybody there seemed to be having like such a good night, and that was what was really cool. You know, for people to come out and show support, buy the merch, that's amazing. But there were people, you know, I was speaking to everybody after the show. They were coming up to me like, "How can I help? Like, what do I got to do to keep doing this?" Because they wanted to come back, they wanted to do this again, they wanted to help me, and it was special. I love performing. I feel like that's my favorite thing to do. So Saturday was dope. It was humbling, for real.
If you're looking for the love, come fuck with us. Come fuck with us.
So I start with that video. It's called The Quiet One. I'm so excited always to show people about The Quiet One because that was strictly a DIY, do-it-yourself tour with an artist that I worked with. I knew him since 2017 from Long Island. I took a big risk in 2019, and I was just like, listen, it's time. It's about that time. And we basically met up and we decided to create a 5-track EP that kind of talked about, you know, his feelings in terms of mental health, in terms of, you know, just really getting into the nitty gritty of just like fighting as well too. And we toured. We went from Washington, D.C., Connecticut, New York to finally get to Boston. It was a big risk. I mean, like I said, we did it without a label. We did it without, you know, we did it without a label, publishing. We did it without a distribution deal, completely DIY. And what we did was we generated over $1,000 in merch and ticket sales as a result. I mean, that video that you've seen with everybody there, that night we generated $1,300, right? About $500 of merch and about 75 tickets sold for pre-sold. This was completely DIY. And I start this, you know, presentation because it was the start to something I love to call creating your own formula. This is the presentation for shifting your music into a career, completely DIY, do it yourself, completely, you know, it's just completely do it yourself. And you're going to see more of the call to DIY today more than ever in the state that we're in, and also some of my predictions as well too. So a little bit about me, right? I said I was going to introduce myself in the beginning, but I thought the video would be perfect to introduce. My name is Anthony Obas. That's me. I'm guided by Obas, right? I am on the left there. You see me hosting events. I like to host events periodically. I think they're fun. I love to engage with everybody as well too. So that's me hosting an event for Leah McJay. She's an artist as well too, but we was just hosting on Syracuse as well too. On the upper right corner, it's just the release of my book of Shifting Your Music into Career Volume 1, which we're going to get more into today as we talk about completely DIY and how can an emerging artist really start from the bottom and take that first step leap. On the bottom left, you see me doing artist development. So I'm with an artist that we work with named Jahar, and we're in the studio. We're, you know, going through beats and sampling and giving us and figuring out marketing strategy for his next album, which I think is going to be debuting next in 2021. And then, as usual, public speaking. That's why I'm here today. That's me doing public speaking about this creative entrepreneurship process, which is amazing. And I would love to share that with you in another time. But today we're talking about music business. That's what we're here to talk about. Music business. So all those is wrapped under one brand, guided by Obas, if that makes sense. So the goal for today, and I want to engage with everybody. How many people want to be managers here? How many people want to be managers? You can just say I, me, I don't know, whatever you want to say.
Raise your hands so you can, if you're in gallery view, you can see hands, or you can write in the chat.
Yeah, chat it. Like, what's up?
Go ahead and write in the chat.
If it's not managers, do you want to be an art? Are you an artist now? if you're trying to be a publicist, right, and send constant EPKs and, sending out to radio, if you're trying to be a radio personnel, or you're just trying to be an overall creative, like, talk to me. What on our mind? This is supposed to be a conversation, not just me lecturing. I'm not a good teacher personally, so I just want to, have a great conversation.
So if you make sure to unmute yourselves, and if it gets a little weird, we can mute again, but if you want to just raise your hand and say something. Can you see everybody in the?
I see Dominic. I see. I have to go like left. I got to go from left to right.
Left to right, yeah.
So,
I can scroll a little bit. Oh, I can keep scrolling. Yep. So unmute yourself and raise your hand if you want to say just like, okay, Dominic, unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Dominic Vesley, and my approach to everything is to kind of gain as much skill in as many areas as possible so that I can really apply myself wherever. So all the things that you listed all sound really interesting. It's just a matter of seeing where I would fit best.
I think, does that apply to everybody? Seems like that's what applies to everybody here. There's just like, I want to dabble in production, or I want to dabble in engineering. I love it. And I said, like, this is a whole presentation is to make you an overall, whatever you're trying to do is to make you overall better in the music game. And that's what I want to do today. So how we get there is, the first step is to talk about my music business journey in terms of my research, in terms of kind of how I got there. That's what we're going to talk about. Then we want to talk about my concepts from shifting your music into a career. I'm telling you, you're going to love it because it's relatable. It's fun. And I think it's joking. Then we're going to talk about COVID, right? I think it's so interesting to talk about COVID and its impact in the music business industry. And then we're going to be talking about moving forward into 2021, right? What does 2021 look like in the music business? What does 2021 look like in music in general? I think that is going to be key and crucial. All good? I like it. I dig it. All right. So the research of the book, I'm telling you, it took me about, 2 years to finish creating the research of the book, to only drop about 46 pages of the book. I know it could have been dropped a little bit easier, but I think 46 pages is just enough, right? Because I had to sample it and I had to see if it actually worked. So in terms of my research, I needed to use personal observations, various references, various case studies in order to create something amazing. So I used Ari Herstand's book, How to Make It in the New Music Business, which takes the DIY approach. I used Donald S. Passman's book, who talks about the very, traditional label as well too. And, I love the two books, but the situation, it just didn't relate to up and coming artists. It wasn't as like low in terms of just starting out, I just felt as though you've been doing it for a minute. What if we could find a book that related to us who are just starting from ground up, who are just fresh out the thing, and like, again, more Gen Z related. And I looked at my personal observation. So I did curation of shows. I mean, I did the two shows that you see there on the bottom left and the top right. I did in Syracuse, this is upstate, right? Where we had 6 artists perform in front of, just local fans, and kind of see what, it wasn't a competition here, but it was to see what can you improve when we get into the book on your performance aspect as an artist, right? How can you create a stage presence so you can gain new fans? And that's crucial. Same thing with Elevate, right? A lot of the consulted albums and singles, so far, I haven't updated the numbers of lists in terms of albums and singles that I've consulted in, but as of late, I think it's about 15 so far. And out of the 15, we've seen, 8 out of 15 be very successful. And that's just because of off the strength of just being consistent. In terms of my work experience, I mean, I've worked at So Far Sounds. I worked at, Sony Music Publishing in the UK. I used to partner with UMG on a ton of events on campus. So it used to be a partnership. I never used to be a part of it. And I used to do radio. I did radio at WERW and WAR, which kind of, going backwards, I really started with radio. But the way I got into the music game was, hey, do you want to be my manager? Do you want to be my manager? And I was like, I guess, I don't know how to do this, right? So, and then it got to the blogging of the business as well too. In terms of references, again, I like to listen to DIY Musicians Podcast, which is sponsored by CD Baby, Billboard, DJ Booth, Digital Music News, and Hypebot. But also in the book, I started to use a lot of case studies, right? And I think that's been the strongest support. It's just like, how can we use case studies to really reference DIY artists, right? And make it more relatable. I think the case studies are much stronger. So I used some of my favorite artists, but I also featured some artists that I just generally didn't know. So I featured Travis Scott. I featured Frank Ocean. I love Frank Ocean. I love Blonde. It's an amazing project. Big De La Soul person. If anybody has something against Frank Ocean, please let me know. So because we can take it personal here. I just love Frank Ocean. But that's okay. That's okay. So with all that being said, we created I think one of the best books for Gen Z. We created Shifting Your Music into a Career Volume 1, which is again available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and Lulu.com. There was supposed to be a video there in terms of talking about shifting your music into career, but clearly it's not up there. Like I said, technical difficulties. We'll keep it pushing, right? That video was supposed to again talk about the process of shifting your music into career, looking at the case studies, but I kind of mentioned that in the last presentation. So we're going down to the breakdown of the book. So I always want to show people how the book looks. So boom, this is how it looks. Shifting Your Music into a Career Volume 1, right? Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Lulu.com, right? The concept is to take music, which is a product, and make it into money, right? Business. So we are going to talk about various chapters, right? It's 12 chapters, but it comes down to just 7 chapters today that's going to affect, the music industry. So I'm going to break down each chapter. Mirror, mirror of an artist. So the concept of mirror, mirror of an artist, it tells us that when we're fully developing as a brand, right, we need to really take in consideration of all the things that inspire us in anything, right? So for us, it's like I use De La Soul because De La Soul was inspired by 90s, 90s funk and house, right? They sampled that era and made that a part of them, right? In terms of their fashion, in terms of their branding. For me, Mirror Mirror of an Artist, how it looks like, I'm a big into, like Stephen A. Smith is a great guy. I love him. I took some of his sampling and I kind of made it a part of my image, right? It's this idea of the image that you see and the image that you want to be, right, should be reflected on you. What that does is it creates a brand value, it creates a message, and it creates likability, and that's what you need in a brand, right? If you don't have a brand message, it is very, very tough for you to make it in the music game. I think is true, whether you're just having 1,000 fans that are consistently paying $10 a month, or you just have 1 million fans that are just paying $250 one time to see your performance. It's about the brand and it's about the image. The image sells, right? So we move on to the next chapter. We talk about the performance effect, right? So this came from a personal observation, and I was just like, wow. I went to a Travis Scott concert, and I'm a big fan of Rodeo, big fan of Days Before Owls. And this was when he was doing the tour of not Astro World, but was it Bees in the Trap? I think what it's called, I don't remember the album. I can't think off the top of my head. But what I seen about his performance was that I gravitated more to his performance because he was flying on an owl. I was like, what man flies on an owl? Like, who does that? Like, as an art, and the creativity made me gravitate to him more. Okay, so I went to a show. And then I curated my own show. And, I was like, let me test to see if this actually works. So I put an artist, never done it before, whatever. And no one knew him. His name was like Shy Leezy. And he performed, he literally got on the chair and started performing in front of the room. And I was kind of scared because I thought he was going to fall. But everybody just gravitated to him. And I was just like, what's going on? And the performance was so good. He engaged with his audience. He did a call and response. Like he did like, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. He also did a sense of like and his audio was clear. Like he he didn't have his vocals playing in the background. He knew his lyricism, so it hit differently hearing it from his tongue, So what happens with the performance effect is the situation, if you perform well, you're gonna gain new fans and new supporters. And I'm a huge believer of that because what happened after my show with Shy Leezy is that people that were there for the one time ended up becoming a fan for him in the long time. That is the performance effect in its maximum capabilities. We talk about Frank Ocean. I'm pissed. Frank Ocean hasn't dropped an album in a long, long time. I don't think that's cool. I don't think that's cool. So Blonde came out in 2016 and now it's 2020. It's about to be 2021. And I'm just like, where's my album? But he can do that. Why can Frank Ocean do that? Because Frank Ocean could do that because he captured you in so many albums that you became a true fan, right? You became a true fan, Tim. So this chapter talks about the rate of artists pumping out music. Should you, as a startup artist, be pumping out music on a monthly basis? Well, I don't know. What's the demand? Are your fans looking for new music? Maybe, maybe not, right? But also the fact of the situation is, we're going to talk about that more in concept. It's like, well, maybe you drop one, you promote it, and then go ghost. Do you have that leverage? So this measures about the power of your audience, the strong support of it, and just how good is your music is. And kind of, I always say it's like the supply and demand. Well, if you have a lot of music, are people really asking for it, right? Does the supply and demand of the music match up? So that's kind of where that chapter kind of interludes there. The Artist Prelude, and I think it's one of the greatest chapters, I think, not the greatest, but I think it's a crucial thing, is the Artist Interlude talks about the process in terms of creating your first track, in terms of creating your first album and really getting it out. So, it starts with just you writing. It starts with you just composing, right? It starts with you selecting, sounds of production to get everything flowing. Then it goes into like the mix and mastering aspect of it, right? How do we mix and master everything into the Artist Prelude? But the situation is, people these days are creating music because of the trend. That's not what we do it. You create music because of the inspiration. You create music because you're truly inspired to create music by any person. It could be, your mom, whatever, but you truly have a love of music. So that's one step. The second thing is when you come in with music, it's also the money situation. Can we afford to do this music financially and also make, not to say you're going to make profit, but at least get close to breaking even, right? So those are the two things I always say that affects the Artist Prelude. And as you see later today, when we talk about the recording and the mix and mastering, stuff like that, COVID does have an impact on that industry, on that aspect too. The next chapter talks about where are those playlists, right? We talk about this, it's like artists, it seems like playlists are the new era for, for you to get your music marketed and expanded, everything. And I think it's great, but also I think it's not great, because the situation is, are people now tuning in to being fans of you, right? People are now paying for playlists. I don't think paying for playlists is acceptable, right? Because the return on investment on paying for the playlist is not, it doesn't equal. So what are you paying for? Are you paying for numbers, or are we paying because you generally want the reach? That's a very good question there. And we're going to talk about that again when we get into further on. The single, double, triple technique, right? A lot of people are like, these chapters make no sense name, but the logic makes sense. There's this thing where it's a trick that people do to increase their streaming numbers by constantly releasing the same content at a different rate. So how do I explain that in a very great way? So for example, I will take an album, right? Let's say we take the last album I listened to was, today was Drake Scorpion's album. So he dropped God's Plan. He dropped Nice for What. He dropped Nonstop. He dropped another thing. I don't remember. He dropped 4 singles before he dropped the album. What he did was he ended up running up the streams of all of those singles first. What he then did was, again, this is all in the project of Scorpion, right? Scorpion project. So he released the 4 singles first. What then he did was, here comes the second technique. He re-released it again, this time as an album. What ends up happening is that the ISRC code, right? This is a great technique if you're a DIY artist. The ISRC code, you basically can rewrite that again into the album, and you start your album off with those 4 streams plus whatever new is getting generated. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So it's really a technique for you to increase your numbers and say you did X, Y, and Z the first week, which in reality you didn't do the first week of reality. You did for a long period of time. Isn't that crazy? Like, that's wild, right? That's the second time. The third time of the release, this time is, what if Drake said he wanted to drop a deluxe? He'll put new songs in there. And then as a fan base, again, you're still loyal to Drake and stuff like that. He'll re-release the Scorpion, again, under the Scorpion project. He'll re-release it again with those, 17 tracks with the additional one. And they will be like, oh my God, Scorpion Deluxe did amazing, great. Did it really though? Yes, it did, because it understood how to use the power of the ISRC code in order to run up streams. That came from personal observation, but also studying other people. So you have the Little Uzi Vert, who did the same thing earlier this year. You had Chris Brown, who did something with that, with his 57 long project, which is, I'm not gonna listen to that. That's crazy. 57 songs, insane. But people still listen to it because he had that fan base. The last chapter is Can We Get a Deal, which talks about my experience in working at publishing, right? Working at Sony TV. And, it was a great time, nothing crazy. But what I did notice was the artists that they were going for were not artists on your regular. They were something we like to call niche artists. And, Donald Passman talks about that in his book, Niche Artists. Niche artists are people that are different, but they're able to generate revenue right back to the label. So what I realized was there was this kid, it's a funny story. There was this kid that kept coming into the label constantly. I was like, who is this guy? Like, who is he? Who is he? And then I found out it's this kid named Aitch, A-I-T-C-H, very popular rap artist on the come up. So he's done with Stormzy and all that stuff. And I was just like, huh. So the deal got situated because he's such a niche artist, right? There's something different about him. It could have been his prospect to gain new fans in an easy basis. It could have been his sound that was different. It could have been his background. It could have been something that was different, the niche. And what I say in the book is usually about the different sound. It's usually, can they sell tickets? It's usually, can they make back the label in money as well too. So that's what I talk about. Can we get a deal? Does everybody understand those concepts? I just want to make sure. If they don't make sense, please let me know, because I will go back and take Shifting Your Music into Career off Barnes & Noble's Amazon, because it has to make sense. It has to make sense. So that was like a whole synopsis of like the book, right? Oh, awesome. Everybody said that was cool. All right, cool. Whew. So then
let me interject right here and just say, before we go on, because there's a lot of information, I wrote down a little bit about each chapter. So does anybody have a particular question for Anthony about any one of those chapters? Anything that you want him to go into a little bit more? Any detail? Just turn your, unmute yourselves if you have anything to ask.
Any thoughts?
Or interject about, yeah. I noticed I learned ISRC code. That's cool. I have an album out. I guess I have one of those, but I never thought about it.
Yeah.
So what about, the question as a startup artist, how often should you be coming up with new material? Any questions about how to come up with, being a unique performance artist, something, that little special thing. For me as an artist, I think it just naturally, things developed over time, just paying attention to my personality and having an opportunity to be on stage enough that things sort of just grew out of that experience. I don't know how much you can just invent in your mind. I think some of it has to be, spur of the moment. Maybe your genius hits you and you're like, oh, I'm going to try this. Anybody I'm just shooting out some ideas I have. Anybody have any input?
I actually do have a question.
Yes.
Just because I am a little bit confused. So you said that you were talking about the ISRC codes.
Yes.
And so my question is it like, so they put out 4 separate singles that are going to be on the same album, but then like, so are you saying that the ISRC code is rewritten, or are you saying that it like, the amount of plays that are on those singles add to the ISRC code that is on the album?
Yeah, so the ISRC code is an identification code for the track. Does that make sense? So basically it's basically an identification of the track. So for example let's say a track was called What They All Say. The ISRC code might be 31207. you can use that power of that track as multiple times as you want to. So you could take that track and really release it again as something different, or you could put it on a whole project. You could retake it again and redo it. It's the power of the ISRC code. So it's the situation of all those streams will continue to add up. Does that make sense? So it'll be like 5,000 plus 5,000 the first release. On the second release, you get 8,000. In total, that will come to 13,000 streams. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yep, great question. Any more?
Good question. Keep going. More questions.
So for that code, let's say you put the same song on Spotify and also Apple Music. Does it have the same code, or are they different codes for the different platforms?
It would be the same code. The whole trick is to. It's so weird because like it's weird because it's like it's the same song, but it's placed very differently. Does that make sense? So you'll hear God's Plan on a single, but then when you hear God's Plan on an album, it's a completely different experience. But all those kind of things just add up to give you, you know, that 13,000 streams. Does that make sense? So for example, you'll get God's Plan as a single. You do 5,000 streams on Apple Music, right? You did 5,000. So then what you say is, okay, I can re-release it again on, you know, as an album. Then on the album, it does 8,000 streams on that album. If you put both of them together, that song did 13,000 in total. It's just, but it's so crazy because the streams tend to go up the multiple times you re-release it in different forms. It is so weird, but it works. What you think, Jacob?
Any other questions or comments about any of those points?
Go ahead.
I have one about the playlists. Do you feel that sometimes that on Spotify or YouTube or something, that having something on a playlist would have any sort of negative effect or, you know, unintended effect rather than having it kind of be its own standalone thing?
Yeah, I mean, the situation with me with the playlist is it has its different effects. It needs to all add up. For me, it's like if you're a DIY artist who's just starting up and you make 1 million streams and you get on a playlist, it's like, does 1 million streams really equal the fan base that you're really putting out consistently? That's the huge problem with playlists. Like, it needs to add up there. So when I see those things of like, you know, going on Spotify playlists and people are like, oh, I did 50K. But it's like, how you do 50K, but you can't even bring out more than 25 people to your show? That doesn't make sense there. You know, that doesn't make sense. Same thing with like Instagram followers. It's like, how do you get 10,000 followers, but you can't really bring over 100 people to your show? Like, does that make sense in terms of the equations as well?
Yeah,
like,
I feel like with a lot of this internet stuff that some of the fans, in air quotes, it's kind of just a passive following.
Right.
Because you might put on a playlist for another artist, but as you're leaving it on, this upcoming artist might be getting all these streams, but
it's interesting, right? It's just very interesting. And like, again, there's a lot of tricks to it, right? Then because as an upcoming artist, you know, you have to, I'm just using Spotify. It's in my book. There's a chapter called Moving Through Streaming Platforms, but you have to understand algorithms, right? And you have to understand, like, what does the Release Radar playlist do? How do you get on your Discover Weekly playlist? Because Discover Weekly is based on algorithms and how many times are people really seeing it and engaging with it so they can actually get onto those Discover Weekly. But it really just starts from the first step is you're getting followers first. Then, you know, after that, it comes on their Release Radar. People are playing on the Release Radar. You're using Facebook ads. You're using you know, Instagram ads to really draw attention. Then you're getting on that Discover Weekly playlist. And because the algorithm picks up, people are really engaging with it, right? And it's generating so many different ways. They put it on a Discover Weekly and it boosts up your stream. Does that make sense? That's one of the most organic ways I've seen playlists really help artists. Now, the downfall is like playlist is not going to be the thing that makes you the most money. It's the thing that's just going to get you, you know, in front of people's faces, I think, personally. What do you think?
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Any questions? What does anybody think? I'm always open to having conversation because this helps me with my research. crazy. I got people thinking. That's great. That means we're great. That means we're doing good. All right. Am I good to move to the next slide? Is that good? All right. Awesome.
That's good. Yep, go ahead.
All right. I'm moving to the next slide. I'm taking off my glasses because we're talking about something very serious now. We're talking about COVID and its impact, right? So here we're talking about how did COVID really affect the music industry? Well, for the first thing is, again, all this is basically from the IBIS World, site, but I think we're going to translate into more layman terms here. So we look at the first one. It says revenue for the music publishing is projected to fall by 7.4% in 2020 as a result of falling disposable income and the widespread cancellation of live performance events. Well, that makes sense, right? Because if you can't touring is what the #1 revenue generator in the music thing. So of course music publishing is going down, right? Because when you're doing these shows, you have things called the performance royalties, right? That you collect from your shows as well too. So it makes sense here. It makes sense. The demand for the industry is expected to be boosted by the large amounts of consumers confined in their homes and streaming more music and TV and movies. Again, we move into this idea of moving into streaming, right? And now that everybody's home, everybody's confined, we're trying to figure out how can we create the best music for your home setting? How can we create the music for you in the scene where it's just you're loving our music at home, right? And streaming it through TV, film, and movies. That is, I believe that's sync royalties. That's synchronous royalties right there. So we're going to talk about that strategy more into the chapters. Revenue in the music group and artist industry to decrease by 62.2% in 2020. So that means artist revenue is going to decrease by 62.2%. That's a lot. That's like 3/5. That's almost close to 3/5. That's a lot, right? Again, remember, our primary revenue in the music industry is touring, right? If you can't tour, you can't sell tickets. If you can't tour, you can't sell merch. If you can't tour, you're not putting out a lot of music, right? Touring is a crucial point of the music industry, and it really does impact everything else on the downfall. Again, like I said on the fourth point, delays in the release of new music primarily due to the inability to record songs, music videos are expected. Like, again, this idea of the domino effect. You can't really tour, you can't really sell merch, so it's like, how do I really record songs and push music videos if I'm not making money off of it by touring and selling merch? Does that make sense? I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I tackled the publishing. I talked about the recording label. Now we're going to figure out how do we take shifting your music into career, volume 1, and we're going to bring it to COVID. How do we attack that? So hopefully everybody can see. So the first strategy here is buy versus stream. Buying an album at $10 versus streaming an album at 0.008. So one of the chapters I definitely forgot to mention was moving through streaming platforms, and specifically about the stream per payout. So I think this is key here. So Spotify pays artists 0.004%. No, 0.004 cent. So that's not that close to a penny. Apple Music pays artists 0.008 for Apple Music. Tidal pays 0.012 cent for every stream. Crazy enough, Xbox Live pays artists 0.02 cent per stream, which is interesting, right? Because it's just like, oh, you're playing my music through Xbox Live while playing Call of Duty and 2K. That's pretty awesome. I like that. So what happens is, now that we know that people are streaming in the house, we're like, as DIY artists, I'm not really making that much. I'm unemployed. Like, most artists are usually working part-time jobs while also funding for their music career. So streaming doesn't really make that much, right? If you're talking about getting your fan base, what you need to do is switch the strategy from streaming to maybe buying it. And the best way to do it, it's how can we product bundle here, where it's like, if I put an album together, maybe you get a poster like the one you say behind me, right? That's low cost to produce, but the value will be extremely well. That means you'll be able to maintain fans, but you'll also be able to gain new fans. It's the value of that project. And I think the strategy here, is to buy versus stream, right? The product bundling is such a key thing. I think that works and again, to combat, as a DIY artist, how to combat COVID. The second thing is live performance, digitally and drive-ins. I've seen people do this, and it's very unique, right? People have done, digital performances, whether it be on Instagram, on social media. I've seen people who have done it on their platforms, like Kate Tronada did one on Friday. And the thing is, it just doesn't hit the same way as being in person of your performance. It just doesn't hit as a DIY artist. So what you have to do now is you have to create an experience within the comfortability of someone's home. You have to make them feel as if they are performing with you without the stage. So a strategy, going back to the first, with artist I was talking about, Nick Moody, we're deciding to go with something called the care package, which is the idea of when we do live performances digitally, basically is you feel the performance live at your house. So what we're doing is we're creating shot glasses for people to drink while also, listening to some of our performances, right? So what it does now is creating that performance, creating that live setting now is like we want to make you feel a part of the brand. Remember I said brand meaning and brand identity means something. So we want to do that with the care packages. It's just a strategy I'm thinking for, strategy here. Studio recordings, we go back to this Artist Prelude. Remember, like I said, people are not going to be able to record and people are not going to be able to go to the studio because it becomes an overhead over time. Maybe it makes sense to, over time, to build an in-house studio, right? To save costs, right? So you might lay down your vocals, you might lay down roughs, maybe do a tad bit of mixing with the producer at your house to save you the cost of actually constantly paying for studio rates, right? And I have an opinion about that, and I'd love to hear what people say, but does the value of studios become higher now because of COVID, or does it become lower? That's a great question that I'm still wrestling with. We talk about social media engagement. Now that everybody's online, everybody has more time to be on social media, right? Again, the thing is the COVID either spikes or it goes down, it keeps spiking again. Either way, people are going to be home. The rate of social media has been high, right? We need to be thinking of content that is so versatile. So we think of Instagram, we think of TikTok, right? Creating TikTok videos. We think of, Facebook ad targeting. We think of Twitter, right? Just doing simple tweets. Maybe a voice note, right? I told somebody to do, now that you do voice notes on Twitter, I told them, why don't you just create, a little series, like a thread of all your voice recordings of you performing, of you like recording something. That's something, right? Something different. So social media engagement. Now that we're into something else, it's like, okay, do-it-yourself strategies. I know that the shows are not working. I know we can't sell merch. Why don't we focus on another category that can be tapped in right now? But even if it's not tapped in right now, it will be beneficial to tap into it now. So in the future, if something like this does happen again, we'll be way ahead of the curve. Royalty revenue, right? I told you about the sync, mechanical, and performance. You get performance royalties from your radio, right? You get them from online radios, mostly. You get them from shows sometimes as well too. So Far Sounds pays people with performance royalties. You have your sync royalties that come from TV, and you have mechanical come from digital sales. Well, we'll see another one is we need more ownership. So lately, this goes back to can I get a deal here, is people are now realizing that they're in these weird contracts now, these 360 deals. The 360 deal is the simple fact of like, if I give you this certain amount, how are you going to give me back the thing? And I'm just going to chip at every single revenue generator that you have. So the tour, the merch, and everything like that. But as a label, if you don't have touring and merch, you're really not making a lot of money here, right? So a lot of artists is kind of reevaluating their power, and it's kind of empower them to say, you know what, maybe I should go independent and really own my thing, because it's like they're collecting a big chip of my thing, and I'm really not making a lot of money, especially during COVID. Then we talk about finally about the reinvention or the rediscovery of music, right? So as a DIY artist, just finding new music, tapping into new things, and reinventing your brand. So if your brand did not work before COVID, this is a good time to reinvent yourself, rediscover the different types of music, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of electronic music. Like I love that. I love house music, right? I started discovering now, big reggae guy. I started discovering, but what that does is you start to realize certain beats and certain samples and certain things that you could just implement to your music and really have this chance to reinvent your brand, rediscover your own music, and really figure out a way to step into 2021 with a new step. Does that make sense, everybody? Hope that makes sense. Whew. We're almost there. Trust me, we're almost there. I just need some water. Go ahead, Brandon.
Just under the social media engagement, why do you say no Snapchat? I'm just interested.
So the thing is, I say Snapchat has its pros and cons, right? Snapchat is very direct. You can engage with your local. So if you're building like a local fan base, you would probably use Snapchat. Does that make sense? But the situation, if you're trying to gain reach, if you're trying to expand your brand, you shouldn't be focused promotional on Snapchat. That doesn't make sense here, right? We're talking about reach, we're talking about engagement, we're talking about increasing impressions, right? You need to be using the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Twitters and the TikTok to really help you expand your brand. Snapchat doesn't really do that. That's a question that I would like to hear. Does Snapchat really does that? It seems as though it's very closed off for fans. I would use Snapchat for only like members only, in terms of my marketing, if I was marketing as an artist, but I wouldn't be primarily focusing on reach, increasing my brand, all that, with only that fans only on Snapchat. Does that make sense, Brandon? That's a great question. I could be wrong. I could be right.
Thank you.
Same thing. What's everybody thinking? I like that question. Any questions?
I think that I get how Snapchat is much more personal. I don't tend to add strangers on Snapchat. But I feel like that wouldn't be a bad idea, or I think it would be a bad idea to exclude it completely, because if you could create like a non-replyable Snapchat, because I know that has been a thing in the past, like it would be a good way to get information to your fans a lot better, because that's something they're seeing it more personally. Therefore, they're going to take in that information a lot better than just scrolling by a post on the internet.
That's what I said. It's the idea of like, you won't be able to see a lot of things. So it's the power of exclusivity, right? I love that point, Dom. Like, that's a great point. That's what I was saying. It's just like, for me, it's like, I'm thinking about a strategy of, we need to expand our reach. We need to, get to new people. We need to, basically how I think about it is, you need to have them aware, interested in order for them to consume the product. Does that make sense? So for me, it's like, if I'm strategizing as a DIY manager, I'm like, we need to get people aware of the brand. So even if they just swipe off of it, at least they're aware of it. But with the Snapchat is like, you can actually see it and really engage with it more on that, instead of just swiping past it, because there's so many more other posts that you could just focus. That is a great point. I love that point. I love that. That's great conversation. Dom, Brandon, y'all on fire today. Any other more questions?
Yeah, I think I have one.
Talk to me.
So for social media, we're using it to get more people to follow our music, and from outside of our local area. How do you suggest or like have advice on trying to reach out more? Because obviously when you make that account, you're getting people like your parents and your friends immediately. How do you reach out more?
That's a great question. I love how we talk about social media. It's my favorite thing. So there's a lot of things that we could do here. The power of hashtags, right? We use hashtags in a way of expanding reach. But the situation is, we don't like a post where it's like 30 hashtag no, hashtag yes, hashtag I'm the best, I'm on one, hashtag. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? We want to use hashtag to increase our reach in terms of people engaged. So the thing is, we wanted to, one, reach the explore page, which is one, but two is we also wanted to make sure it was like, those are the things that people are searching. We want to take advantage of search engines, search optimization, right? So that's what we'll use. So for me, when I post, I haven't done it in a long time, but I have this 5 hashtag formula, which is hashtag the location that I'm in, hashtag a current event, so something that's happening now, so that my feed can expand to a different reach. So for, probably yesterday, the Jets lost, so I'll probably throw a post. It has nothing to do with, but I will probably do a hashtag Jets, just so it can get, when people are looking at Jets, my content be there as well too. Then I talk about a personal hashtag, which allows you to have all your content within you. So I have my hashtag Obas rants. I don't have hashtag Obas rants I have it for a reason, because when you look up Obas rants, it's all my content. Does that make sense? So the hashtags is a powerful thing. If you also think about influential marketing, right? Which is the idea of people just promoting you off the strength, right? Off the strength of that. So people see dope content, they'll share it, they'll save it. Those help gain new reach into no post. Not the likes, it's usually likes, engagement, but it's usually the shares, people reach, posting it on their thing off the strength of saves. Those is what really helps drives that reach. Does that make sense? Then we're going into cross promotion, which I really eat off of it. It's this idea of cross promoting with other brands. So for example, is, maybe Jacob has this dope, art, music, right? And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, all right, let's do that. So what happens is I will at him on IG or at him on Facebook. He'll be like, oh, dope, that's amazing. And Jacob, I could either mess with your song or I don't mess with it. It's not you. I don't take it personal here. But it's the situation of it gets to your audience, right? It gets to your audience. And then what happens is, it's so weird. People end up clicking the story and it drives you right there to your profile for attention. What that does is now increases the amount of the profile page or the amount of people that comes to your page. Does that work, Rita? Does that work? I like that question.
Yes, and I also have a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Go ahead. I love it.
So what is your view then on ad promotion, where on Instagram and Facebook you can pay to like boost your posts?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I used to be big on Instagram ads, right? So I would put up $30 for an ad, right? Just so that my fans can, my people can really see it and really like remember, like, I'm here. This is my event. This is the special thing. So that's why I pay for advertisement on Instagram. But what I realized was I end up getting these weird fake bots. Like it wasn't real people. And I'm just like, that doesn't help me. Like that doesn't help me at all. I would rather just have like real people do that. So I switched over to Facebook ads, which are a lot more targeted and a lot more efficient. And I got better results on the Facebook ads. But to be honest with you, my brand, and this is from a book that I read, it's called Contagious. But the best way to expand your brand is the word of mouth. I think it still comes down to this idea of people really talking about you without you being there, or with you being there as well too. And I think that's the most powerful way of marketing yourself as well too, instead of constantly paying $30 on the ads. Does that make sense? Rita, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, that's actually really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, and people be forgetting also that it's like, we love digital marketing, right? But the situation is the algorithms always change up on social media. So you have to constantly switch up your marketing thing. So how do you switch it up? I created a newsletter, right? I said, let me be more direct here. That's the situation here that we face in COVID. It's like, I wasn't getting a lot of views on my social media. So I said, I need to be more direct. I don't spam people. That is so wrong. I don't spam people because one, you're asking for too much now. You usually DM people to get personal and just say, hey, here's my content, whatever. But I email people. I don't email them every week. I email them once a month just to say, hey, if you missed out on my content, here you go, type stuff. I'm looking into something with these cell phones. Basically, it allows you to basically send out group messages when you need to. But again, not spamming people, but when you need to. It's using that code to be direct. But I'm also about this idea of physical marketing, which is the idea of how do you market yourself, physically. One of the biggest things that I've been doing is this, again, these wristbands is Obas brands, is this idea of when people wear it, they're like, oh, what is that? What is that? That's marketing right there. That's me marketing myself without me even like being on social media. Does that make sense? So the question here is, we need to start thinking about not only just digital marketing and physical marketing, but we need guerrilla marketing, which is a hybrid of almost every type of marketing. Does that make sense? I love it. Great question. Any more questions?
I have a question over here.
What's up, Kim? Talk to me.
Okay. It's more about the live performance part in your slideshow, because I wanted to know if you've had experience with any artists that have tried to do a live performance during COVID with drive-in. Like I've seen Roddy Rick in LA has tried like a drive-in thing where people just drive. I think it was like a huge desert pit or something like that. And they were able to have like a similar concert experience from their car. The only difference is it's just socially distanced and everyone. So do you feel like that could also be a new alternate way now that COVID has come?
I definitely do. I definitely think the driving is crucial, but it's again, how do you create that performance for people in the car or outside the car? So for example, it's like again, I have to look into the Roddy Ricch situation because it's so weird. I wouldn't expect the drive-ins to work on a very, hip hop based, artist. Like personally, if I'm thinking about drive-ins, I'm thinking about more of a singer-songwriter route. I'm thinking about country music. I'm thinking about more subtle things. Does that make sense? But there's a way to combine the hip hop into that more subtle way, right? We can do the DJing spin, right? We can do, maybe having a live band like Anderson .Paak would be beautiful for drive-ins. You know what I'm saying? Maybe Kid Cudi would be good for drive-ins as well too. But it's again, how do you create that experience so they could fully either A, those that who are already your fans continue being fans, or B, gain new fans. Just with the car situation. Does that make sense? You might even want to do a hybrid, right? Drive-ins were used mostly for, movies, right? So how do you combine that aspect of movies into now music, right? Sampling a different industry. Does that make sense, Kim? Like I'm very curious to see how drive-ins work. I just don't think they're going to be effective for every genre, but they could be. I mean, I think live performance is going to be huge in 2021 and moving forward. What you think?
Yeah, I get it. I was just wondering because, I mean, I found out from a YouTuber that went to this concert in LA.
Right.
And usually LA is the big place of like mainly artists, influencers, things like that.
Right.
So I was just interested to see how artists take advantage of this now that COVID has impacted the music industry.
Right. I'm curious too. And it's also weird because a person like that does it in a city, it won't be as effective. Does that make sense? Like it won't be effective because we have a bunch of buildings and there's not really open space, right? But if you do it somewhere like, maybe upstate, it might be effective, right? A small parking lot might be effective. It's just creating, it's like, how do you create the scene for people? How do you create a vibe? And that's going to be very interesting. Like I said, I don't know how effective the drive-ins are going to be more than the digitally, but we're going to keep, again, this is all a research and trial and error. So we're seeing what can work and what can't work, I love the question, Kim. Any more questions? Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it.
I've noticed that a lot of those drive-in shows, it's a lot of like big bands, like a lot of following behind those bands, So what would you suggest for smaller bands around, Rochester, once winter is cold and the outdoor shows stop? How would you suggest, playing music to the fans and, staying active?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting here, right? So if the thing is, if the drive-in doesn't work, so first of all, people are going to have to literally load up the gas and really keep it going to stay heated in the wintertime. Personally, right? That's just how it is, right? So the thing is, do you want to do it outside? You're probably more likely going to try to do it inside, right? So, and it's crazy that you said that. It's because now it leads us to this idea of, do you open up, do we go the So Far Sounds approach? Do we keep it very limited of capacity, but we do like a special invite? So we do 10 different people each week. Does that make sense with the drive-in? You know what I'm saying? I just don't know if driving is going to work in the wintertime because it gets cold, right? Do you do like a projector and everybody's in a car of you doing a performance? Like it's the situation of like, why would I be in a car watching somebody perform? Does that make sense? But you got to create that experience of intimacy. You know what I'm saying? Of how do you create that vibe in the car while also watching that as well too. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I just think that, the drive-ins are more for bigger bands and that kind of format doesn't work for, small artists or small. Yeah.
I don't think so either. That's why I said that maybe I think that's why I said the digital and live one might be the most effective one to do. I mean, if you're a small artist that's doing drive-ins, I mean, it's already hard to get people to get to the location. You know what I'm saying? Now you're asking people to come and drive in and like just watch you perform. There has to be more to it. So maybe you do a drive-in and people are passing out popcorns, right? So you get like a movie theater, right? That's why I said the sampling. There has to be more than just the drive-in aspect and seeing somebody perform, right? I think there has to be a little bit more. Great question, Jacob. Any more questions? I like these questions. I'm gonna sit down and actually like write them down and do more research. And I think everybody should,
I have another question.
Go ahead, Kim, talk to me. I love this.
Yeah. So now I think about it, do you feel like there's a big impact of the radio on artists, like and how much streams they get? Because like what if now in COVID, radio stations like, hey, you can tune into this station, and that's how the artists, if they wanted to perform a show or something like that, or do a podcast and able to like get their music out there, or if you're a new artist, do you feel like that could help them in any way?
I think online, yeah, it's so crazy. Everybody's like tackling the next slide actually, but it's cool. But I think online radio is going to be cool. Like online, people don't realize online radio has royalties in it. So even if you get bumped into it, you go into ASCAP and BMI, you register it. That's a little bit of something, right? We be forgetting that if someone has a presence on the radio, that's another reach. That's another way of marketing, right? You have these new apps called Station Head. You have this app called Clubhouse, right? Where you can actually like engage with different people. It's kind of like an online radio type of thing that allows artists to actually expand their reach. So, I mean, I think online radio is even a greater demand now than ever before than the actual, because again, no one has anything to do. Podcast is another way to do it. So you get the intimacy, but you also get to hear the music as well too. But again, it's about the following, right, of that radio or podcast. What do you think, Kim? I'm curious.
I feel like, well, I used to be a big fan of the radio until like now, because I'm like so tired of mainstream radio just replaying the same 9 songs by the same artist within an hour. It gets annoying, especially if we're on a long drive. But I feel like it depends on who the artist is and who their audience is as well. Because there's so many different radio stations that kind of tune into one big one, like iHeartRadio, for example.
Right.
They connect in different cities, but they all come back to the same thing at the end of the day. So exactly. I do feel like it depends on who the artist is. Like if it was maybe Drake, I feel like it would go really well. But if you're a smaller artist, you probably would have to have a connection for it to work.
Right. Or you just start, like if I'm an artist here, if I'm starting out as an artist, I probably would hit up my local radios, right? So if being at Syracuse, artists would hit up WRW, which is on the it's on the dial, but also online, right? It starts with somewhere, right? You're just getting it for reach and you're trying to look for those hosts that, the show is kind of popping. And that makes sense to help you with the reach. For certain artists like Drake, it's like he already has that fan base. Like, oh, I got the new Drake fan. Like as a radio person, I was like, you want that exclusive stuff. That's how you get new fans to kind of get to you. You know what I'm saying? So that's a really great point. It's that cult following, if that makes sense. Any more questions? Did I answer the question right, Kim? What you feel? How you feel? I love engaging with this.
Yeah, you answered it.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any more questions? Oh, y'all been awesome. I love ya. I appreciate ya. So we on to the next slide here. We're about to wrap it up. What does 2021 look like for you as a DIY manager, publicist, A&R, all that good stuff, right? We kind of talked about this hybrid of performances, right? So there might be some live performances with limited capacity. People might do it at their house. People might, with 10 people, and then might special invite people constantly. You might have the digital performance setting experience. And so where you have, people on live and you have these small, this app called like B app. It's a live streaming one. You might do a Twitch, right? I forgot to mention about Twitch. Twitch and Reddit, right? You might do a live performance there and create a digital experience there for people to see. We're looking at getting at royalty opportunities, the film, the TV, the online gaming, like Kim said, the online radio, the virtual performances, right? I think, we're going to see royalty revenue generate even more in 2021, right? Competition, right? It's so weird. I read this article on The Guardian and it said that 64% out of the survey of 564 musicians are thinking about leaving the music industry. Wow, if you think about it from a small scale, 64% of 564, I'm not good at math there, but I think 60% gets you a little bit over 300. That's a lot of people that are leaving, but that turns the competition from a little bit of high into a little bit of medium. So if you're still in the game, you have I think an easier shot now to get in because there's not a lot of people there. It's that barrier of entry here. in terms of strategies for 2021, we're going from, a lot of artists have been very cost effective. They're trying to save at every dime as well too. But I think in 2021, some of our strategies here as managers, publicists, A&Rs, as talent buyers as well, is to really find those type of music that is on differentiation, that pushes creativity to its maximum, that's able to reinvent and also recreate the wheel of creativity here. And, I always talk about the strategy, which is amazing. It's called market penetration. How can you enter into a market that you never tapped in? So we talk about using the power of social media for cross promotion, right? We might even something, little insight here. Like, I wanted to do cross promotion constantly. So what I probably do is, strategy I did in 2019 was I did a show in Boston. Again, I'm from New York. So how do you get a good amount of people to do it? It's basically is you get a couple Boston artists to perform at my show, right? So I can increase my brand presence in Boston, right? So the Boston artists performed. I also was able to sell my book. It worked out perfectly. My brand was into the Boston market. Like it started from online hitting people up to now reaching it to an in real life. That's what I said, in real life transaction where we meet each other, we engage with each other as well too. Was it my most successful show? No, but the situation was I used that strategy to penetrate the Boston market. So now I have New York, Boston, and when I was in the UK market. So I'm going to be using that strategy in 2021. And if you're also managing an artist, you're an artist yourself, publicist A&R, or somebody that's a thing, I think it's a great strategy personally. We're talking about expanding the brand. It only takes one to be in that market range. Oh, wow. That was great. I like it. Any questions, any concerns?
You got a lot of energy, Anthony.
I do. Listen, I love this energy. You're
amazing. Let me ask you, when you say you do a show, what are you in that show? The organizer, the manager, a performer?
So what I am, I'm usually the organizer. I'm usually I don't want to do that anymore, honestly, but I can. I usually organize the show. So what I did was in 2019 was, 2018 I was doing Showcase, which I don't like personally, like they didn't really feel intimate. So then I started going into more networking shows in 2018, and I'll still will do it in 2021. But now I'm doing more of a different type of style, which is I've never seen, not even Ari Herstand have done, which is this idea of, to prove my book is right, you have to see it in live action. Does that make sense? So now it's the talk of the book to also the idea of the show. What ends up happening is I don't charge people to come I don't charge at the door. But the whole goal is, because it's free, you see the book, I want you to create a sale of the book. So your ticket ends up becoming the book. If that makes sense?
Right.
So. Yeah,
and
so that's.
Would you hire yourself out to be somebody's manager? Is that one of your things you do? So
I do brand management. So I basically do is I turn a project, I turn a single into income, right? So if you've seen, that's why it wraps all the way into that artist. Like, again, I don't really manage, like I'm not an artist manager. So I'm not sitting here like, EPK, I'm not hands-on babysitting and all that other stuff. But I'm really focused on how do we take a project and sell it to everybody. So sometimes I probably set up tours. Sometimes I'm a strategist. Like I figure out various ways to strategize the product. Then I figure out a way for us to, penetrate TVs and all that stuff. I'm kind of like a little liaison, if that makes sense. But but my job is not to, it's a risk. I think as a manager, it's a risk to fully risk it on one artist, right? And it's tough, right? That's why I created the book here, because the book, it allows me to manage you from a distance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up, does anybody have any more questions or comments for Anthony?
I have one. It kind of goes with both like this in our last slide. But regarding no, you're fine. It's just regarding like COVID-19 stuff. Do you agree with like most of the people that we've talked to in our music business classes that right now is the best time to be learning about the music business because it's almost stagnant? It's not really changing.
I think it's the best. I think it's the best time right now. I think it's, it's the best time. Like, if you have to learn what happened before. But I do agree there's going to be a little change in the music. I don't think it's going to be drastic, but I think there's going to be a little change. I think now that labels are now going to be figuring out a way to reform the 360 deals, right? I think that more artists are going to be more independent. I think that one of the things that we're slipping, like you said, learning about more music thing, I think now is the perfect time to learn, because these royalty opportunities are a generator that we as DIY artists have never, I say we because I'm not a musician, but I'm representing DIY artists all around. I think that, that's an opportunity for you to prosper outside of just you making music, right? Those placements. So I think it's a very great question. Now it's the time to really learn and study the music business, but it's also, this is the time for you to apply and really engage with it. So if it's somebody that's your friend that's an artist, see if you help them out, engage with it, because you end up learning a lot when you don't not only just study, but apply it. That's where my shifting your music into career comes from. It's studying, but it's also applying. But I've learned more applying than I did studying, if that makes sense.
I think that's the way for most people. You got to get out and do it. Yep, that's the way we learn. Well, this has been very enlightening. I'm delighted to see so many people interacting with Anthony. And
thank you.
I'd like to just send our appreciation to you for just donating your time and your ideas. I can see that people's wheels are turning, and I know that we're also connecting it with a specific class as well. So I hope this spurs everybody into, being able to channel your energies in new and innovative ways, and getting yourself to reach out into the community and advertise yourselves. It's a long process. You have to be very persistent in becoming a well-known artist. And certainly the ways you do that today are very different than the ways I did it 20 years ago. But Anthony, you know a lot about the current ways to do this. So it's fabulous. I hope you sell 1 million copies of your book.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Thank you for having me.
Maybe we'll be able to chat with you again. I'm sure you guys will figure out how to find Anthony online. So, if you want to keep up the conversation, I encourage you to do that. Yeah,
I'm going to add my email here. Feel free to send me an email anytime. It's very simple to literally find me on everywhere. I don't hide myself because you could just look up Anthony Obas on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. You could just find me there. It's just literally my name. I don't have nothing to hide. This is me. This is my brand. So yeah, let's keep the conversation. Let's do it DIY, strictly, do it yourself. And I'm glad that everybody tuned in. It was great questions. We the people, we love it. Thank you so much, Anthony. And if anybody here, if you end up doing something that it relates to the presentation or any ideas in the book, let Anthony know. It would be really cool for him to find out that some of his ideas, they germinated as seeds and grew into something. That would be awesome. That'd be great. So it's great to see everybody. Thanks for spending a little over an hour with us tonight, and we'll see what happens. A lot of challenges, but really interesting things this coming year, I think. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Good night, everybody. Peace. Have a great one. Thank you. Peace.
Thank you.
Peace.